You can see it now.
Why are we so fascinated by the Liberty Bell? What is it about this perfect, fragile bell that draws so many here? Why are you here? Isaac Norris, Speaker of the Colonial Pennsylvania Assembly, ordered a bell with a biblical inscription for the State House in Philadelphia. Originally called the State House Bell, it would later be known by a name familiar to all.
Let the bell be cast by the best workman, with the following words well shaped in large letters like that.
Can you see the bell?
Time is 12, and our tour is at 12:30. Say something then.
Have you seen what's on the bottom of your camera?
What's that?
SAS.
We're waiting outside Independence Hall for our tour. It's a lovely sunny day. I don't really know what else to say actually.
I was going to say Roger Kipling.
It's one of those
Roger
war
Kipling.
poets.
It's First World War, isn't it?
Don't want to know. It's the only one I know.
Who didn't die?
So soon.
Who did die?
I don't know.
Fidel died. Who was the other one? Siegfried Sassoon didn't die. Michael Robert Graves. I think it's probably Sassoon. 12:30, is that?
On the way up
Assembly Room, which is where Pennsylvania's legislature met, they moved upstairs, making way for the Second Continental Congress. Congress began meeting here in May of 1775. Often in American history, you come away with the impression that all these men were running to Philadelphia, eager to declare their independence from Great Britain. However, the first battles of the American Revolution were April the 19th, 1775. The battles of Lexington and Concord up in Massachusetts. It was not until July of 1776, when the men in this room could actually bring themselves to admit to themselves that they had exhausted every other option. Independence from Great Britain was the only option they had left. The British government was not interested in anything they had to say. They never had been. They never would be. So we'd actually been at war with Great Britain for more than a year before Congress finally declared independence. And we actually celebrate the wrong day. Congress declared independence on the 2nd of July, 1776, when they voted to adopt a resolution proposed by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia. Lee's resolution stated that these United Colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. 2 days later, on the 4th of July, Congress voted to adopt the amended text of the Declaration of Independence written by Thomas Jefferson. So for some unexplained reason, we don't celebrate the day Congress declared independence, but the day the Declaration of Independence was adopted by the Congress. The one thing I can assure you of, the last thing the men in this room were all worried about is which day Americans would all be out barbecuing and setting off fireworks and going to parades. As far as most of these men were concerned, there was very little to celebrate. In declaring independence, they were now formally going to war with the strongest power in the West. Great Britain had the largest navy in the world, more than 530 warships. The United States had 8. Great Britain had the second largest army in Europe. It was the best trained with all the best equipment. The United States had a bunch of militiamen and minutemen who had very little training and even less equipment. No man in this room could have known France was going to be our ally. The French government did not make that decision for another year and a half. So it very quickly occurred to members of Congress, achieving independence was going to be much more difficult than simply declaring it. And certainly when the Congress declared independence here, they had no idea how independence was going to be achieved. Certainly they figured that out. Then 11 years after independence was declared here, the Constitutional Convention came to Philadelphia. In May of 1787, they swore themselves to secrecy and they got down to work. These men realized they had to create the one thing that frightened them, a strong, powerful central government. They didn't have much of a choice. They had to create a government that would have the power to tax, a government that would be able to maintain order at home, and a government that would be respected abroad. They figured the only way that could be done safely would be to divide the government into 3 separate branches, what we call the system of checks and balances. You know, the one thing that the Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court always knows for certain is the other 2 branches are watching. And if one of those 3 branches does something that it's not supposed to do, if it's not doing something that it is supposed to do, the other 2 branches are going to take action and force that 3rd branch into compliance. It's an amazing idea in the 18th century. You know, so is the idea that one man could be the head of state, the head of government, and the head of the military. What most European governments split up between 3 different people, we put all onto the shoulders of the president. And one of the questions that had to be answered here was, how could you grant one man all that power, allow him to use that power effectively, but still limit his power? And they came up with a lot of different ideas. And certainly one of the most radical ideas that made it into the Constitution was the idea that although the president is the head of state, he is forced to justify himself to his people at least every 4 years. Every 4 years, he is required to stand for election.
It's a big building, isn't it? It doesn't look this big from the outside, does it? It's like a TARDIS.
The legislature itself had throughout most of the Revolutionary War while Congress was meeting downstairs. That room was also used during the occupation of the House captured American offices. What I'd like to do at this point is give you about 10 minutes to have a look around. If you have any questions about anything, come up and ask. You can go ahead and take photographs. You just open those doors. You're going to have a look at the committee room. Out in this lobby area, there's another set of doors. While all that is going on, we actually still have doors going in and out. Yeah, they'll let people come film here as long as it doesn't impact on us.
bad.
Oh my god, I can't believe he's doing this. Does he look scared? Not in the least.
That was scary. I want to take him to